Throughout the Spanish Grand Prix weekend, Ferrari encountered an issue in high-speed corners. This began all the way in the first practice session on Friday and lasted up until the last lap in the race on Sunday. And what the two Ferrari drivers of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz were experiencing in these high-speed corners was porpoising. Yes, you hear that right. The phenomenon of bouncing through the corners has returned to the SF-24 in high-speed corners. And with this weekend's Austrian Grand Prix coming up, and that track having such similar characteristics of high-speed corners with the long sweeping radiuses of them, you could very easily imagine Ferrari will encounter the exact same issues again at the next race. And this would put them at a huge disadvantage against their competitors. While the likes of Mercedes, McLaren in particular, and Red Bull have been on an upward trajectory, or in Red Bull's case, in the hands of Max Verstappen, a very stagnant one, this could leave Ferrari further and further off the pace as the weekends progress. And the same could be said of Silverstone. Now, what is it that's kind of brought on these porpoising effects in the high-speed corners at Barcelona? And why could it as well also return this weekend in Austria? Well, I think it may have something to do actually with the introduction of their latest upgrade package in Barcelona, which allowed the SF-24 to extract additional downforce and of course load. And that is what I think the biggest issue comes from with them. So this upgrade package, which consisted of the bodywork on the side pods shrinking, as well as other subtle changes in and around that area, and of course the addition of a brand new rear ring for the Barcelona event, it seems that the team alongside their drivers couldn't kind of extrapolate a setup window or performance from the car in which they could eliminate the porpoising in the high-speed corners. And I think since we've had other tracks before this and this issue hasn't been at least publicly spoken about, I don't think they've experienced it in any sort of similar way as they did last weekend. And this, I think, is going to be a major problem for them. Now, the Ferrari cars this season in general, I have seen them personally bouncing up and down on the straight, and it hasn't been a particular issue for the team because it's nowhere near as severe as, say, they had at the beginning of this ground effect era. But it is still there, and I see it quite often at every single race weekend. Maybe you guys have picked up on it as well. And it seems this particular upgrade has now reintroduced that, unfortunately for the team and their drivers, in these high-speed corners. Or at least in high-speed corners that have such a long extended radius in terms of how long you're in a corner for each of the corner phases. Corner entry, mid-corner and corner exit. And the biggest issue for the drivers is in the mid-corner phase. That's when the bouncing is kicking in, and of course that's going to make the car very unstable through the high-speed corners. And of course that's going to increase the temperatures internally of the carcass of the tyre, and that's of course going to naturally increase tyre wear, which is why Ferrari seemed a little bit off the pace. Not by much, of course, by only like 0.3 of a second, but over a 67 lap race, that's going to eventually add up to that however many seconds they had to the race leader. Now, is it a simple fix for the team? Well, that's nothing I can answer personally. It could be that they just never found the right setup window with this new package to kind of dial out this porpoising, and they need to kind of go back to Maranello, run all the simulation tests from all the data that they gathered over the weekend, and then they will, of course, utilize that data and input it into their simulation work that they do for Austria, and hopefully the problem can be solved and they can then they can come back to a much more normal weekend. That's the outcome the team and all of the fans would want. Now, do I believe it's going to be that simple? I really cannot say. I think it could be a case of it could be very specific to the Circuit de Catalunya, or it is going in fact to be something that happens and is persistent with the team in high speed corners, particularly the characteristics which have long corner radiuses. Now, what's interesting for me, in first practice in Barcelona, Charles Leclerc had the old package while Carlos Sainz had the new one. Now, I'm pretty certain that we can basically say, since they went with the new package, they were a lot quicker with that package than that of the old one. And of course, Charles had a bit of a balance issue with that said old package. But perhaps, with hindsight, that bouncing may not have been evident in that old kind of Imola upgrade package that they had. And this new one has been the issue of introducing it again. So it's really going to be interesting to see what Ferrari can do this weekend, whether they can rectify the issue and be able to go more on the attack against the likes of McLaren and Red Bull, or whether they're going to be looking in their mirrors behind them again like they kind of were last weekend out. But for certain, it's going to be a test of the engineers and the drivers to come up with the solution to this issue that they had. Hopefully, for their sake, it is simply just a track-specific issue and they rock up at the Red Bull circuit in Austria and they don't have that. And we can have a good weekend with all 4 teams actually being in the mix for the race victory. But I do expect to see McLaren leading that group of 4 teams. I think overall we can quite certainly say they have the quickest driver and car combination with Lando Norris and the MCL38. No matter what kind of track we go to, whether it's got low speed corners, medium speed, high speed, or a mixture of all 3, the MCL38 seems to literally go out on track, have no setup issues, and can just crack on with their race program or their practice programs. And that's what you need. It gives you the confidence to be able to just attack the weekend in the manner in which you want. And of course, when you run into unexpected troubles and issues with the reintroduction of porpoising as Ferrari had, that always puts you on the back foot throughout a weekend. Right guys, that's the video. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, and I'll see you all in another video.